We're going to talk about the standards that are part of our determining area and perimeter unit. So we have two main standards, 5.4H, where students are expected to represent and solve problems related to perimeter and or area. This does include in this standard volume. We save this for the next unit. So this is not this unit. So don't worry about that yet. Then we also have 5.7A, where we solve problems by calculating conversions within a measurement system, and that's customary or metric. We don't mix conversions in elementary school. So let's start by talking about 5.4H. I want to think about what do students already know about perimeter and area before I start thinking about what's the finish line for 5th grade unit. Where do I have to get them to? I need to start with what they already know. So in 3rd grade, they were introduced to the concept of area and perimeter for the first time. So they had an introduction to perimeter and area. And they did that with whole numbers only. And their focus was, for area, the focus was rectangles and squares, of course, because we know that a square is a rectangle. And they also focused on composite figures that could be broken into rectangles. So composite figures that are made up of rectangles. Okay, so what about perimeter? For perimeter, it was a little tougher, even though it was fairly a new concept. For perimeter, they were asked to find the perimeter of a polygon. So any straight-sided closed figure. And if they were given the perimeter and other side lengths, then they were asked to find the missing side. So they also found missing sides. And why are we spending time all the way back to 3rd grade? Because you're going to see when we get to the 5th grade problems that all of these skills have been combined in 5th grade. So we know that. And then in 4th grade, they continued with squares and rectangles, whole numbers only still. Now, where does that come into play in 5th grade? Well, in 5th grade, we know that 5.3K is our problem solving, add and subtract all positive rational numbers, and that comes into play in perimeter. So let's think about that. How does 5.3K affect us here? Well, that means for perimeter, I could have measurements that are whole numbers. I could have measurements that are decimals. I could have measurements that are fractions. And then if I think about our multiplication teaks, I'm running out of room. And I'm not listing them because it's more than one teak. I can think about area could be whole numbers, decimals, and we haven't seen it tested with fractions. So let's start with that. If we think about the way that this progressed from 3rd to 4th to 5th, we can see that that's a lot of skills that a student could be expected to do with our perimeter and area unit. Students are expected by the time they come to 5th grade to have this 2-year foundation of perimeter and area. We know that they still seem in 5th grade to confuse perimeter with area, area with perimeter. Which one am I solving for? So we need to make sure that we are spending some time focusing on how do we know the difference? How do we know what the problem is asking for? It's going to be super important that one of your expectations in your class is that no matter what we use the star reference. Pages, because when we get to the big test, our focus is not on what formula did we memorize. Our focus is on applying that formula. So use the formula chart. It's given to you. So that means once we get to this unit, from here on to the end of the year, we should be regularly using our star reference sheet daily. That means students get to use it on their unit tests. That means students get to use it on homework. That means they get to use it on classwork. They use it all the time, because the more comfortable they get with using it, the more likely they are to use it when it really matters. Now, before we look at some problems to see how we are expected to work with this standard in 5th grade, I want to talk for just a second about calculating conversions. This is not the unit where we will teach all of conversion calculations. We are only focusing on length. And that's just in the context of area and perimeter. So what do we want to make sure? If my measurements are given to me in 2 different units, I convert first. Convert everything to the same unit first, then I can solve the problem. So convert all measurements to the same unit. Then solve. That's really important, because if I have a rectangle and I've told you that the measurements are in yards on one side and feet on the other side, that's going to affect how you solve it if you don't convert first. So we're going to look at the different kinds of problems students solve in 5th grade for area and perimeter, and I want you to think about all the skills that they use from 3rd and 4th and then bring those into 5th. So here's one of our problems. Let's see if I can zoom in. So you can see this one is just a simple find the perimeter, but we're given the measurements in decimals, and this is a griddable. So we're given all of the measurements. We don't have to find a missing side on this one. We just have to work with decimals to solve it. This particular problem goes back to what students did in 3rd grade, where they are finding the area of a figure, but they have a composite. So they have to find the area of one part, then the area of another part, and in 3rd grade they call that finding the area of a composite figure. 2 more to look at with you, 3 more. This one is a combined figure again, but here we're not just using rectangles. So you can see with this problem we have the perimeter of both of these figures given to us, the total, and then we have to find the perimeter of the equilateral triangle. So we're able to look at this and say, what's the perimeter of the rectangle, subtract that out of the total, and then we'll know what the perimeter is of the triangle. We have another one that we're given a composite figure where we have to take the information that we know and find the missing side lengths for corn to find its area. And then last, we are given, I'm going to move that because it's a little hard to read like that. We're given a square has a perimeter of 20 centimeters and an area of 25 centimeters, and then students use the ruler to find which one of these lines could be one of the sides of the square. So you can see how we use a lot of the skills that we've gained from 3rd and 4th grade when we move to 5th grade's area and perimeter unit. Obviously, there's nothing else to learn about area and perimeter. We already know what they are. We already know how to solve them. So we can see that the rigor increases dramatically from what they've done with only whole numbers and only squares and rectangles in prior grades.